that original. So what we're doing here is we want to fully make sure, one way of doing that is a process we call hugs. So we want to highlight the main idea of the article, main idea of the paragraph. We want to underline any evidence that supports that. We want to gloss over and ask questions, or we want to gloss over and identify major points, and then we want to summarize. So first thing I'm going to do is read through my paragraph. In an era in which business acumen is so highly prized in political candidates, it's frustrating that the nation's elected management team, the U.S. Congress, once again has the nation on the edge of government shutdown. Friday's surprise announcement that the U.S. House Speaker, John Boehner, will resign his position and his seat next month is a sobering consequence of political leaders continually putting ideology above the business of governing. So if I'm summarizing this whole thing, I think it ties in with Congress and government shutdown, but I also think it has to do with the consequences of putting ideology above business. And so I have to ask myself, which is kind of the main idea? And main ideas are bigger things, and evidence is what proves that main idea. And so for me, I have two things in here that it could be. I look here, U.S. Congress is putting the nation on the edge of a government shutdown. That's really strong to me. The other one is, it's a sobering consequence of political leaders continuing to put ideology with the business of governing. So I'm going to have to ask myself, which of these is bigger? Well, this, the U.S. Congress putting the nation on the edge of government shutdown, seems to be an example of this. Political leaders continually putting ideology above the business of governing. So I think this is my main idea, that government leaders are putting ideology above governing. And actually, so I'm going to highlight that. That's my H in hugs. And I actually feel like this, the U.S. Congress once again has the nation on the edge of government shutdown, is an example of that. It's evidence. It's proof that that's happening. So now that's taken me through my H and my G. My last two steps, I'm going to gloss. So why call Congress government or management? That's a question I have. I don't seem to be managing much. And then, why is there a shutdown? One thing about asking these questions is, as I'm reading, this tunes me in to answer these as I find them. The last thing I'm going to do is summarize, and I'm actually going to summarize over here. When I summarize, I try to stay under 10 words. This is one of those things where less is more. So what I want to do is look at my main idea here, and I'm just going to say political leaders choose ideology over governing. And as much as I can to make my life easier, I am trying to choose words, political leaders, ideology, governing. Try to choose words that are coming directly from my paragraphs. So we're going to do this again. We're going to practice this. So with this second paragraph, the Ohio Republican will be remembered more for his steady, though increasingly exasperated, leadership than landmark legislation. He merits the nation's thanks for keeping a mature hand on the congressional majority when a small group within it was willing to weaponize the debt ceiling or shut down the federal government to achieve aims lacking broader support. Well, this paragraph, my tendency is to think down here, but I don't think that's what the whole paragraph is about. Down here, the Ohio Republican will be remembered. Okay, who's the Ohio Republican? I'm going to go ahead and gloss that real quickly because I've got that in my head. Will be remembered more for his steady hand, though increasingly exasperated leadership of landmark legislation. He merits the nation's thanks. So what it feels like is really we're talking about this Ohio Republican more. So that seems to be the main idea of this paragraph. So for me, I'm going to say the main idea is he merits the nation's thanks for keeping a mature hand on his congressional majority. Now, what's evidence of that? Small group within was willing to weaponize the debt ceiling, shut down the federal government, kept a mature hand on congressional majority. We'll take the achieved broader support as well. So that's really what I feel like is the best evidence here. So I'm going back through and glossing. Why are they willing to weaponize? That's that same question up here, but it's still there. I haven't answered it yet. And the other thing is to achieve aims. What were they trying to achieve? So that takes care of that. The last thing I want to do is, again, summarize. So I think we're talking, who's the Ohio Republican? Well, up here they were talking about U.S. Speaker of the House John Boehner. So I'm going to look that up real quick. Okay, John Boehner's from Ohio, so this must be John Boehner. I'm going to go ahead and flip that. So John Boehner will be remembered for his steady increasing hand. So really what I think this paragraph is, John Boehner did a good job. And that matches my main idea. So I'm probably okay. So I've gone through two of these and I've kind of walked through. So what I'm going to do is not do this one with you, but I'll walk through the steps and I want you to do them on your own. And then I'll go back through and I'll say what I think was right and why. So Boehner manages as best he could to be expected, as could be expected, the minority within his own party, managed as best he could the expected minority within his own party, who were willing to use extreme measures to try and govern the majority. Replacing Boehner, which some Republican House have angled for, I don't know, I will want that job, will not magically allow these critics to impose their agenda. Okay, that makes sense to me. So these critics must be the people, the extreme minority. And so I'm just going to draw a little arrow here. These critics, minority within his own party. So I know those two things are connected, to impose their agenda. Republicans control both chambers of Congress, but fall short when it comes to the number needed to override a presidential veto. Compromise with Democrats and President Obama, still needed for the good of the country. So the first thing you want to do is probably think about, what do you think the whole paragraph is about? We kind of have been starting at summary, really. If you're having trouble with this, think about the who and the what. So for me, the who here is this minority within their own party. And the what is really imposing their agenda. And so what I think the whole paragraph is about, because down here we also get this idea of they control both chambers of Congress but still need to be able to override presidential veto. So I think what we're looking at is really that they need to work with others. So I'm going to go ahead and write that down and say minority within party still need others. That's kind of clear to me. I don't know if it's clear to anyone else reading this at the time. So now I'm looking for something, a passage that kind of matches that. Give you a second. So what I'm going to say here is replacing Boehner will not magically allow these critics to impose their agenda. Because I think that's what we're talking about, that we still need to compromise. And so my evidence then, how do I know that they still can't oppose their agenda? Because they fall short when it comes to the number needed to override presidential veto, and because compromise with Democrats and President Obama is still needed for the good of the country. So I've highlighted, I've underlined my evidence, and I've summarized. All I need to do now is gloss. So who is this minority? And yours might not match mine here. That's my big question right now. So I think what I will do is one more with you. We'll do the same thing we did up here, and then I'll put a complete highlighted form online so that you can go ahead and keep practicing this and then just check against mine when you're done. So, yet another politically manufactured crisis is regrettably at hand. An end-of-the-month deadline looms for passing legislation that authorizes fiscal spending. 2016 authorizes fiscal 2003 spending. Not really sure about this word. I'm going to mark that for later. And if it gets, this is another word, I'm going to mark for later. In a stalemate over Planned Parenthood, closed signs will go up on national parks, federal agencies, and other operations as of midnight, September 30th. So what I'm looking for is the main idea. So for me, the main idea is here. Yet another politically manufactured crisis is regrettably at hand. How do I know that's the main idea? Because the whole thing talks about the consequences that are coming. The end of the month deadline for fiscal spending, funding over Planned Parenthood, closed signs will go up on national parks.